Well, the time has come for the final leg, Wave 3 of the Titan Death spoilers. Those will include cards from the remaining factions: Custodes, Ruin Storm, Agents of the Sigillus, Sisters of Silence, Night Households. No Defenders of Caliban. None. Sorry, don't know what's going on there. That's a question we'll have to ask ourselves and Everguild sometime. But all that aside, I've got spoilers for the Legio Custodes today. So I appreciate you guys for joining, checking out. Before I get into the spoilers really quick, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing or recommend the channel to others as well. Deck lists, card by cards, news updates, as well as the Warp Chatter podcast, which features here on the channel and on most listening platforms. It's a podcast by players for players. Now, with all that said, let's take a look at the leg of the Legio Custodes. We're going to start with Hieronymus Guard. This is a common. It's a 3/3. It has sentinel, as Custodes tend to do. It's when your warlords attack, this troops gains +1/+1. It's not understated for what it is. I mean, technically, it's pretty good stats for a 2 energy card. The problem is with that 3 health, your opponent is more likely to clear this before they attack you, before they attack your warlord. So I don't know if you're going to see the buff happen too often, unless there are some other ways, or your opponent has got like an awakened troop or a troop that attacks on its own. Maybe they don't see this thing, or you've got this thing somehow stealthed or warded so they can't target it otherwise. But it's okay. It's okay for a common. It's not a bad idea. I think the idea is to try to like punish your opponent for leaving Custodes troops on the board, which is something that the Custodes have a problem with. Typically, the punishment is, your opponent, you don't kill the Custodes, your opponent doesn't draw a card, you're willing to take the extra damage. Well, I think this seems to be a trend that we're seeing here changing, because the next card we've got is another card that I think does this better with the Hetaeron Captain. Has Sentinel. It's a 4/4, again a solid price for a solid card, but it's also got Relentless Heal 2 to your warlord. So if this is a Custodes that you do not kill, then your opponent is going to be healing. So this is a troop that your opponents are going to want to get rid of, as opposed to stick around. And if they don't, then you're gaining 2 health at the start of every turn. Now, the downside is you won't be drawing a card, but anybody who's played Custodes or played against a skilled Custodes player can tell you that if you're playing the cards, if you're playing the troops, you're in a position where you can recover from that nicely. Now, that's important to know, because it's going to tie into the mission. I have the mission. I'm ready to share it with you. I would like to see what these commons and these epics are going to be, but first let's take a look at the mission. So the mission is True Firstborn. Love the artwork here. Start your turn with a Custodes in play 5 times. That's not too difficult to do, but it's harder than it sounds, because that's 5 turns that you're not drawing cards. And typically, you won't be playing Custodes in olden days. In the 31st millennium, you wouldn't be playing Custodes turn 1, because you want to be drawing cards to get your hand built up before you start dropping Custodes. So this isn't a mission that's going to happen early. This is a mission that's probably going to happen mid to late game, unless we see a shift in how these Custodes support cards with this new wave are going to be. We've seen 2 so far. I'm curious to see more. Now, the reward ties into that concept, I think, very nicely. The reward is Shield of the Emperor. Your warlord gains your first Custodes. Each turn costs 0. Now, this is really important to know, because what this means is that your Custodes, not your vehicles, this isn't going to work for your Telemon Dreadnoughts, but for your big bad boys, for your Terminators, for your Aquilon Terminators. These guys could be 0. And then you could still feel free to drop an Epheroy, an Eratan, maybe a Lenten Knights, nice Artulon Veterans. Maybe you want to go with the Azulton, who gained this wonderful Ordnance 3 now. That's a pretty solid body. Like, you cannot deny that. Now, if you're going Custodes as troops, and less vehicles, less Trajan or jet bikes. Maybe you still want Telemon Dreadnought in there too. That's not a bad reward. The difference is it's really going to come down to how you play your Custodes deck. I think this has potential to reward a play style that the Custodes seem to have gravitated away from as the game has gone on. It's been much more play Paragon Spear, play a lot of tactics, play minimal troops. This is focusing much more on you're playing power troops, you're going to punish yourself, but if you make it through, you will get the reward. I'll be honest, I kind of expect this True Firstborn to be changed a little bit, or the reward even. It's not super powerful, it's achievable, but it's a punishing achievement. There's no card exchange whatsoever. As a matter of fact, this is punishing you even more. Even though you're playing Custodes at cheaper, your Custodes will continue to have sentinels, so the more turns that you have Custodes that you're not finishing your opponent, the less cards you're drawing, which ultimately will spell your doom. It doesn't necessarily punish Shapura or Constantine Valdor, who hasn't hit Reckoning, because of their ability to either draw a troop from your deck, or you've got the Battle Honor drawing a troop, right? But you still have to do something with that. So in that place there, are you really going to want to include Imperial Bureaucrats in your deck? Or are you going to include something more along the lines with the Lex Ultima? Or maybe just simply have a better play? I think if you had, just going off this a little bit more, but I think if this was 4 times, and I think if the reward here, solid as it is, was also your first Custodes each turn costs 0 and relentless draw a card, that would work. You would bypass the Sentinel. You're not gaining extra cards. That might be too much, but at the same time, this isn't a mission that's going to win itself on its own. You're going to win by the power of the Custodes card troops. And those troops are beefy, but they're not fast. So, and just a soft plug, you can go back and take a look at the podcast episode, listen to the podcast episode we did talking about the Legio Custodes cards a few months back, a month or two ago, and we kind of talked about that a little bit. So these are the cards I've got to share for you guys. I hope that they are interesting. I like the artwork for them all. I think Hetaeron Captain is probably going to be a winner for that build, especially, and if we see more cards like this, then we could really maybe make that deck concept a possibility. So we've still got, I think, a rare and an epic to be included, maybe 2 rares and an epic, right? If we take a look at the other cards, the other factions that had new cards added, the legendary was the mission. But then, like for this one here, we had I'm just looking at the Sons of Horus because they had that. They had the epic, and they had a rare. They had 2 rares because they've got their flanker here. So yeah, so we're going to get 2 rares, and we're going to get an epic to be added into that mix. I'm very curious to see what those will be and how they will enhance this concept. So that is it. Those are my spoilers. Thank you for tuning in, checking out, and I hope you're sharing the information, spreading it far and wide. Keep playing Legions, and we'll talk to you later.